Be playful and stop taking yourself so seriously. And so it's ironic that I talk about this today, and a coincidence because a friend of mine just told me that I need to be less of a teacher in these videos and more like, engaging and passionate. So I am very passionate about these topics, but it might not be come across properly. So I'm going to try to be more, fun, engaging, and less preaching. And so what I want to talk about today is that as we gradually get older and have more responsibilities in life, like being parents or have to take care of other people in our own lives, we become increasingly more, how should I say, worried and serious, and life is serious, etc. And that's the case. Like, of course, bad things can happen, and you kind of need to, in some shape or form, plan ahead, especially if you have responsibilities. But life is to live, and as cliche that it sounds, it means you gotta have fun, and fun doesn't mean necessarily getting drunk or partying like crazy. It can occasionally, but fun means just that you have joy, that you're joyful in life, that you're playful, you're not taking yourself so seriously, you smile. Like, since I've been on this journey of personal exploration and trying to understand better how life works, for the lack of a better term, like, I'm much more self-observant and also observe everything around me much more critically. And ask, like, why are things like that or in certain ways? And what you just notice if you walk through, your city, or, during rush hour or any other time of the day, that most people don't smile, at least in most parts of the world. And not just don't they smile in that moment, they just generally smile very little. Or if you want, go through your Instagram feed and just look at, well, I guess there everybody tries to, make a good impression, but generally you will pick up on people that generally you see barely smiling. And I would argue that they are just not having a good time, no matter what they say, or maybe they don't even realize anymore because they have been in that state, for so long that they don't realize there's another place. And maybe that person is you. So you gotta have to ask yourself, like, is that how you want to live the rest of your life? We're like worrying and being stressed and taking everything so seriously. Like, yes, like, I'm not making the argument life is not serious, but you need to find joy in life. And actually there's so many amazing things in life. Like, I don't know, there's so many things to learn, to discover. But the problem is when you take yourself so seriously, you create this expectation that, you gotta be serious because you are a serious person, so smiling means you're not serious. I remember when I was in investment banking, in meetings when we were, I would argue, negotiating very serious matters like share purchase agreements in terms of company transactions, etc. Like, I always felt the need, and maybe that was an early showing of where my journey would take me, helping people to find more joy and to enjoy their lives more. But I would always joke around with the counterparty. And, it doesn't matter that we're talking about $1 billion deal here. We can still have fun and, create personal banter, even with the opposite side of the table. Like, and some people I worked with, some people appreciated that, and it depends also where you're culturally coming from, etc. And of course, other people weren't so able, especially to enjoy that, especially if they're not in that place and they're taking things too seriously. So again, I'm not talking about here as a judgment. I'm not saying, but it's more about yourself. If you take yourself too seriously and as a result you don't smile and everything is so dramatic, well, that's exactly the reality you get. So it's not from the point of like that it's nicer for other people if you're more joyful. No, it's just think about yourself for that moment. Like, of course it's also nicer for other people, but if you can't enjoy life, then for what are you living actually? And now you might throw many things at me, and of course I don't want you to confuse joy with having fun. Like, joy just means you have a joy of living. When you wake up in the morning, there's something that drives you out of bed, and it's not the need that you need to go to your office, but there's something more. There's something like you're excited what the day brings, what surprises, what new connections. If you knew exactly how your day would unfold, that wouldn't be a life. If you would know every day would know what happens in every day for the rest of your life, you wouldn't want to live that life. Yet we crave like to kind of plan and organize everything, but it takes the joy out of life. That's a problem or one of the problems people when they get into midlife crisis, because they're in this life routine and every day is the same, and they're like, for what? And they're stressed and have so many responsibilities. And yeah, this is the right question. You can ask yourself that question before you get in a midlife crisis. But I guess I'm trying to make a bigger point here, like whatever life's purpose is for you, or what nature or the universe intended it to be, if you can't enjoy it, like then why would you want to live? Like, kind of, that's the point I'm trying to make. Like, it needs to be, you want to be excited about lives, and it shouldn't be like going through life shouldn't be a chore. And if it is a chore for you, then that means you need to change something. And you can just look at your life. And I think intuitively, again, intuition is this super powerful tool that we kind of have removed by rationalizing everything and living up here in our head. But intuition probably tells you already the answer, what's wrong in your life, if you don't have joy. And again, I'm not saying every day is going to be this super joyful. It can be, you can get to that place, but that's a very high standard. But like, you should generally, the majority of days, you should feel joyful and you should be excited about what's happening. And as Steve Jobs, one of his famous quotes, he said, like, every day I look myself into the mirror and ask myself if what I'm about to do today, if today were my last day, would I do what I'm about to do today? And if the answer is no, too many days in a row, I know I need to change something. And I think that's a really great, bar to measure. And so it doesn't really matter with whether what you do is rated as highly a place where you want to be by society, or whether it's approved by your friends or family. It matters whether this is what you want to do. I think there's this story that always comes to my mind, that this job that was offered to someone I know, and she said, like, I have to take this job because everyone wants that job. Yeah, but it doesn't matter. Like, if it's not for you, if you don't want it, like, why would you take it just because it's so hard to get and everybody wants it? But if you don't want it, it's like you get a present, and let's say there's poo in there, and okay, that's a bad example because no one would want poo, but there's something in there that you don't want. Like, why would you take it? You leave that person, you leave that gift to the person. So when you look at, like, why, assuming that your life doesn't have as much joy as you would want it to have, and again, there's no absolute bar, but you know your own bar. Do you feel joyful about life in general? Yes or no? If the answer is no, then you should change something. And I would argue that what that is. If you're really honest to yourself, you might be ignoring it and denying it, but you know the answer. If you're really listening to yourself and you switch this off, and you switch off what everyone tells you what you should want, and you rather look at what you want and allow that to come out, and then compare that to where you're at, you know the answer, what you need to change. And then it doesn't mean that you immediately can change it. It might be a process, and again, you have to work within the realities of your life. And there are restrictions, right? There's responsibilities, there are financial constraints, etc., and health constraints maybe. So you can't just you're not Superman. But there is changes you can make, and you can make them gradually. So there should never be an excuse for you to say, oh, because the moment you give up agency, the moment you say, like, oh, there's nothing I can do, well, that's it. There really won't happen anything then, because you just gave up and you basically said you can't do anything. So it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have full agency over life. You can change everything. Of course, there are external restrictions, but within that, there's much more room than most of us think. We kind of look around and look what everyone else is doing, and we think that's all we can do. But there's so much more, right? If you go to different places, life is different, and people do different things, and there's always people who do everything differently, and then they become these rebels, or they become these hugely successful people. In fact, the most successful people are not doing what everyone else is doing. That's why they're so successful, because they're doing things differently. They realized, oh, this doesn't make sense what everyone else is doing. So I encourage you to, and I realized I've been preaching a lot again, or teaching. So let me know also what you think, whether this is a good style or bad style. But anyway, I encourage you to kind of review and look at your life and think about how much joy you feel, and if not, what stands in the way, and to start kind of exploring what you can change little by little. And if you do, life will never be the same again.